glowing like molten gold under the setting sun, and inside one of the tallest skyscrapers, a man sat in his polished office, surrounded by silence and the weight of his empire. Ethan Carter, a billionaire CEO known for his cold determination and sharp mind, leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the glass wall that looked down upon the busy streets below. His office was the symbol of power. Mahogany desk, expensive art pieces on the wall, a golden pen lying perfectly on a signed contract worth billions. Yet, despite all the luxury, Ethan felt empty. For years he had chased success, building his empire brick by brick, sacrificing relationships, sacrificing love, even sacrificing the small joys of life. He had learned to hide his heart behind the mask of a ruthless businessman, because the world respected money, not emotions. At least, that's what he had always believed. That evening, just as he was about to close the file and leave, the door to his office creaked open. At first, Ethan frowned, irritated by the interruption, but what he saw next froze him. Standing timidly at the door was a little girl, no more than 4 or 5 years old, with golden curls framing her innocent face, wide blue eyes filled with hesitation, and small hands clutching a white rag as if it were a lifeline. She wore a simple apron, her sneakers were worn out, and her jeans had faint marks of dust. She didn't belong in a place like this, a world of glass and steel and billions of dollars. Yet here she stood, looking at him with a mixture of fear and hope. Before Ethan could react, the security guard rushed in, breathless and apologetic. "Sir, I'm so sorry. She slipped in while I was checking deliveries. I'll take her out immediately." But Ethan lifted a hand to stop him, his gaze fixed on the child. "It's fine. Leave her here." The guard hesitated, then nodded and left, leaving the little girl and the billionaire alone in the vast office. Ethan rose from his chair, adjusting his suit, and walked toward her. He crouched down so that his eyes met hers. His voice softened in a way it hadn't in years. "What's your name?" "L. Lily," she whispered, clutching the rag tighter. "And what brings you here, Lily?" Her small lips trembled as she tried to find words. Finally, she said, "My mommy, she cleans offices here. But today she's sick. She said if I don't help her, we won't eat tonight." Ethan felt as though someone had struck his heart with a hammer. This tiny child, who should have been playing with toys or drawing pictures, was standing in a corporate tower, trying to save her mother from hunger. For a moment, Ethan saw himself, not the man he had become, but the boy he once was. Memories flashed before his eyes. A small apartment, his own mother scrubbing floors with tired hands, the nights he had gone to bed hungry because his father had abandoned them, the silent tears of a woman who had given everything for her child. "Where is your mom now?" Ethan asked gently. "At home," Lily replied. "She said I should try to wipe some desks, maybe someone will pay me something. Even a little. I don't want her to be hungry." Her words broke the billionaire's carefully built walls. He swallowed hard, fighting the lump in his throat. For years, he had buried the pain of his past under layers of wealth and pride, but here it was, staring at him through the innocent eyes of a child. Without a word, Ethan walked to his desk, pulled open the drawer, and took out an envelope. Inside was his latest bonus check, a number so large that even he no longer cared to count. He placed it into Lily's tiny hands. Her eyes widened in shock. What is this?" "It's for your mom," Ethan said softly. "So she never has to worry about cleaning offices again. And you, Lily, you should be in school, not here. From today onwards, you'll have everything you need." The little girl's lips quivered, and tears filled her eyes. "But, why are you helping us?" Ethan knelt again, his voice breaking. "Because once, a kind stranger helped my mother when we had nothing. That's why I am who I am today. And now, it's my turn to pass it on." She dropped the rag, ran forward, and hugged him tightly. Ethan froze, then slowly wrapped his arms around her, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in decades. The office that had always echoed with silence now echoed with the sound of a child's sobs and a man's unspoken redemption. But this was only the beginning. Ethan didn't stop with Lily. That night, he visited her mother, carrying food, medicine, and the promise of a new life. Her mother wept, unable to believe that a billionaire had stepped into her tiny apartment, offering help without expecting anything in return. Ethan arranged for her medical treatment, gave her a job that didn't involve breaking her back, and enrolled Lily in one of the best schools in the city. But as days turned into weeks, Ethan realized something he had never expected. Helping Lily and her mother filled the emptiness inside him more than any deal, any contract, any profit ever could. His board members didn't understand. Why waste time and money on this? They asked. Charity doesn't increase profits. But Ethan smiled at them, a smile that carried a quiet strength. Not everything is about profits. Sometimes, it's about purpose. Soon, he started a foundation in Lily's mother's name, dedicated to helping single mothers and struggling children. He poured not just money, but his time and heart into it. Every week, he would visit schools, orphanages, and shelters, listening to stories of pain, of resilience, of hope. He found himself again in the eyes of those children, and each time he extended his hand, he healed not just them, but also the wounds of his own past. Years passed, and Lily grew. No longer the timid child with a rag in her hand, she blossomed into a confident young woman, educated, intelligent, and compassionate. She became the voice of the foundation, standing on grand stages, telling the story of the day a CEO knelt in his office, not to close a deal, but to listen to a little girl's trembling voice. Audiences wept, investors donated, and the world began to see Ethan Carter not just as a billionaire, but as a man with a golden heart. Yet, behind every speech, every applause, Ethan always remembered that first evening. The way Lily had looked at him with hope. The way she had hugged him with trust. The way she had unknowingly given him back his soul. And on the day Ethan passed away, decades later, the city mourned. But standing at his grave was Lily, now a woman with her own children, carrying forward the legacy he had built. With tears streaming down her face, she whispered, "You weren't just a man of business. You were my guardian angel." Lily's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The small apartment that once echoed with her mother's coughs and the constant fear of unpaid bills now started to fill with warmth, security, and laughter. Her mother, Maria, had been given a stable job within one of Ethan's companies, one that matched her skills but didn't drain her body. For the first time in years, Maria slept peacefully, knowing her daughter would never go to bed hungry again. Ethan often visited them, not as a CEO, but as a friend. He would sit on the worn-out couch in their living room, sipping the simple tea Maria served with shaky hands, and listening to Lily's endless chatter about school, about her drawings, about the stars she saw from her tiny window. Ethan felt something stir inside him each time, something he thought he had lost forever. The connection of family, the joy of being needed, the comfort of love untainted by greed. As months rolled into years, the bond grew stronger. Lily began to see Ethan not just as the kind man who had saved her mother, but as a father figure. And Ethan, though he never admitted it openly, began to think of her as the daughter he never had. His employees started to whisper. The media caught wind of his sudden philanthropic ventures. Headlines blazed. Billionaire CEO turns philanthropist, Ethan Carter adopts street children's cause, from ruthless to compassionate, a transformation. Some praised him, others mocked him, but Ethan no longer cared. For the first time in decades, he was living a life that felt real. But life, as always, tested him again. One stormy evening, Ethan was in a board meeting when his assistant rushed in, pale and trembling. "Sir, it's Lily. She was in an accident." The words sliced through him like a blade. Without a second thought, he abandoned the meeting, ignored the angry calls of investors, and rushed to the hospital. His car sped through the rain-slick streets, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they turned white. Memories of his mother's suffering haunted him as he prayed desperately, "Please, don't take her away." Not her. When he reached the hospital, he saw Maria weeping in the corridor. Ethan's heart stopped. But then the doctor appeared, assuring them Lily was stable. A car had struck her while she was crossing the street, but she had survived with minor injuries. Relief washed over Ethan like a tidal wave, and when he entered the room to see Lily lying small and fragile in the hospital bed, his eyes filled with tears. She looked at him and whispered weakly, "I knew you'd come." At that moment, Ethan realized he was no longer just helping out of guilt or duty. He was bound to her. She had become a part of his soul. From then on, Ethan doubled his efforts. He expanded the foundation, not just in New York but across the country. Schools, shelters, hospitals, all began to carry the mark of his contributions. Children who once wandered the streets barefoot now walked into classrooms with books in their hands. Mothers who once cried themselves to sleep found hope in his programs. And through it all, Ethan carried Lily by his side, showing her the world, teaching her values, and preparing her to one day take over the mission he had started. But success always attracts shadows. Rivals in the corporate world began to see Ethan's compassion as weakness. "He's distracted," they whispered. "He's wasting company resources." Lawsuits piled up, competitors plotted hostile takeovers, and investors threatened to pull out. Ethan stood tall, but inside he battled sleepless nights. Could he protect both his empire and the fragile lives depending on him? One night, sitting alone in his penthouse, Ethan stared at the city lights. He thought of the boy he had once been, the boy who had nothing but a struggling mother and a dream. He thought of Lily, sleeping peacefully in her new bed, safe because of him. And he thought of the cruel world that still judged him for choosing kindness over greed. He clenched his fists and whispered, "I'll fight. For her. For every child like her." Years flew by. Lily grew into a teenager, bright and determined. She excelled in her studies, not because of the privilege she had gained, but because she remembered the rag she once held in her tiny hands. She often told her friends, "I was once that girl no one noticed. But one man did, and he changed everything. That's why I'll never forget where I came from." Ethan would listen silently, pride swelling in his chest, though he never told her how much she had changed him too. But fate had another storm waiting. Maria, Lily's mother, fell gravely ill. Despite the best treatments money could buy, her condition worsened. One night, as machines beeped softly in the hospital room, Maria held Ethan's hand. Her eyes were weak but full of gratitude. "You saved us," she whispered. Promise me you'll always protect Lily." Ethan's throat tightened. He nodded, his voice breaking. "I promise." Maria smiled faintly, then closed her eyes for the last time. The loss devastated Lily. She clung to Ethan, sobbing, "Don't leave me too." Ethan hugged her tightly, whispering, "Never. You'll never be alone again." From that day on, Lily lived with Ethan. The billionaire who once lived in a cold, empty penthouse now found it filled with laughter, with teenage arguments about curfews, with birthday cakes and late-night talks. He became not just her guardian, but her family. And slowly, the man once feared for his ruthlessness became known for his kindness. But even as Ethan built a new life, the business world continued to test him. Scandals erupted, lies spread, and enemies tried to tarnish his name. There were nights he felt the weight of the world pressing down, threatening to crush him. But every time he faltered, Lily's voice pulled him back. "You're stronger than this. You taught me never to give up." And so he didn't. By the time Lily entered college, the foundation had become one of the largest in the country. She began working alongside Ethan, traveling to poor neighborhoods, comforting children, raising funds. She had inherited not just his wealth, but his spirit. And as people watched her speak passionately on stages, they realized she was the living proof of his philosophy, that one act of kindness could change generations. The world continued to watch their story unfold, some with admiration, some with envy, but Ethan no longer cared about opinions. For him, true success was not the billions in his accounts, but the smile on Lily's face, the children he had saved, the mothers he had uplifted, and the legacy he was leaving behind. And as he looked out once more at the city skyline, with Lily by his side, Ethan finally felt what he had searched for his entire life: peace. As the years unfolded, Ethan Carter's name became more than just a symbol of wealth and business, it became a beacon of hope. The transformation was so profound that even the harshest newspapers, once calling him the Iron CEO, began to headline stories like, "The Billionaire with a Golden Heart." For Ethan, none of it was about the headlines. What mattered to him was the change he saw in Lily and the countless other lives touched by his work. By the time Lily turned 21, she was no longer the fragile child he had first met. She was a poised, intelligent young woman with a voice that could move hearts and a determination that rivaled his own. At one of the foundation's annual galas, she stood on stage in a simple dress, not designer or flashy, but filled with grace. The hall was packed with politicians, celebrities, and business tycoons, yet when Lily began to speak, every eye and every ear turned to her. "I was once a little girl holding a rag in my hand," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I came into this building not knowing if my mother and I would eat that night. But one act of kindness changed everything. A man who had the world at his feet decided to bend down and listen to a child. Because of him, I stand here today, not as a victim of poverty, but as proof that kindness can rewrite destinies. And it is my promise to carry this forward." The hall erupted in applause, but Ethan's eyes blurred with tears. He wasn't looking at the donors or the flashing cameras, he was looking at her, the girl who had once hugged him in desperation and who now stood tall, shining brighter than any empire he had ever built. But with every step forward, challenges lurked in the shadows. Ethan's health began to falter. The years of stress, late nights, and endless battles had taken a toll on his body. He ignored the fatigue at first, dismissing it as age, but the day he collapsed during a board presentation, reality hit hard. The doctors diagnosed him with a heart condition. "You need rest, Mr. Carter," they insisted. "If you keep pushing like this, your body will give up." Rest. The word felt foreign to him. How could he rest when there were still children starving, still mothers struggling, still battles to fight? But when Lily held his hand and pleaded, "I need you alive, not just as a memory," he realized he had to slow down. For her, it was during this period of forced rest that Ethan began reflecting on his life more deeply than ever before. He would sit by the window of his penthouse, watching Lily work tirelessly at the foundation. He saw in her the same fire he once had, but hers was gentler, driven not by ambition but by compassion. It reassured him that the mission would live on long after he was gone. One afternoon, Lily brought him a photo album she had been secretly compiling. Inside were pictures of children who had been helped by the foundation, smiling faces, graduation gowns, families reunited. On the last page was a picture of the two of them. Ethan with his arm around Lily at one of her school graduations, both smiling as if the world had no shadows. Beneath it, Lily had written in neat handwriting, "You didn't just save me. You gave me a life worth living." Ethan's hands trembled as he traced the words. His eyes stung with tears, and for the first time, he admitted aloud, "I thought I was giving you a future, Lily. But you gave me back my soul." The bond between them deepened with every passing day. They weren't bound by blood, but by something stronger: choice, sacrifice, and love. Ethan began introducing her in business circles not just as the face of the foundation, but as his successor. Some raised eyebrows. "She's not even related to you," they whispered. Ethan would only smile and reply, "Family isn't about blood. It's about who stands beside you when the world turns its back." But the world wasn't done testing them. A financial scandal erupted, orchestrated by one of Ethan's oldest rivals. False accusations claimed he had misused foundation funds for personal gain. The media pounced, investors panicked, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt the old suffocating weight of betrayal pressing on his chest. He sat in his office, newspapers spread across his desk, headlines screaming lies. Lily stormed in, her eyes blazing with fury. "We can't let them destroy what we've built," she said. "We'll fight this." Ethan looked at her, weary but proud. "You remind me of myself when I was your age," he said quietly. "But you have something I didn't. You have a heart that refuses to harden. That will be your greatest strength." Together, they fought. They hired lawyers, opened the foundation's books for public scrutiny, invited journalists to see every record. Slowly, the truth emerged. The rival who had framed them was exposed, his empire crumbling under the weight of his own greed. Public opinion shifted again, and this time the headlines read, "Billionaire and foster daughter vindicated, truth triumphs." That night, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Lily turned to Ethan. "Why do people hate goodness so much? Why do they always try to destroy it?" Ethan sighed, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Because kindness shines a light, and those living in darkness fear it. But we don't stop shining. Ever." The foundation not only survived the scandal, it grew stronger. Donations poured in from people who admired their transparency and courage. And Lily, now recognized as a leader in her own right, began to gain a following beyond Ethan's shadow. She was invited to conferences, interviewed on television, even approached by political leaders seeking her advice. Ethan watched all this with quiet pride, knowing the torch was being passed. He no longer feared death, because he knew his legacy was secure in her hands. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Ethan turned to her. "Lily, when the day comes that I'm no longer here, promise me you won't let grief stop you. Promise me you'll keep building, keep fighting, keep loving." Tears filled her eyes. She grasped his hand tightly. "Don't talk like that, you're not leaving me." He smiled softly. "One day, we all leave. But what matters is what we leave behind. And you, Lily, you are what I leave behind." The words carved themselves into her heart, becoming a vow she would carry forever. The years passed like pages in a book, each one filled with moments of triumph, struggle, and quiet tenderness. Ethan grew older, the silver in his hair deepening, his once unshakable body slowing with age. But his eyes, those sharp eyes that once measured profits and risks, now glowed with something entirely different, pride and love. The foundation had expanded beyond borders, reaching countries he had never stepped into, and yet his name was whispered in villages, schools, and hospitals across the world. Children who never knew who Ethan Carter was still whispered thanks for the meals they received, for the classrooms they sat in, for the hope that bloomed in their lives. And at the center of it all was Lily. She had grown into a remarkable woman. No longer the little girl clutching a rag, no longer the teenager searching for her place, but a leader in her own right. She spoke at international forums, her speeches streamed to millions. She looked into the cameras not as someone basking in fame, but as someone carrying the weight of responsibility. "Kindness is not charity," she once said, her voice firm, "it is humanity. And humanity is what keeps the world alive." Her words echoed across nations, inspiring thousands. Ethan often watched her from the sidelines, quietly smiling, his heart swelling with pride. Sometimes, when no one was around, he would whisper to himself, "You've become everything I hoped you would be, Lily. More than I ever imagined." But time is relentless. Ethan's health continued to decline. There were mornings he could no longer rise without help, days when his chest ached so badly he had to pause just to breathe. Lily noticed every change, though he tried to hide it from her. One evening, she confronted him. "You can't keep pretending you're fine," she said, her eyes wet. "You've given everything to the world. Now let the world take care of you." Ethan chuckled weakly, though his voice trembled. The world never gave me much, Lily. But you did. You gave me back my heart. And as long as I see you standing tall, I'll never regret a single thing." The words broke her. She hugged him tightly, whispering, "Don't leave me yet. Please." He stroked her hair gently. "One day, I must. But you'll never truly lose me. I'll live in the lives we've touched, in the smiles we've created, and most of all, in you." The day came sooner than she wanted. It was a calm spring morning, sunlight spilling softly through the curtains of Ethan's room. He had grown frail, his once commanding voice now little more than a whisper. Lily sat by his side, holding his hand, refusing to let go. He looked at her one last time, his eyes filled with love and peace. "Do you remember the first day we met?" he asked, softly. Tears streamed down her face. "I was just a scared little girl, holding a rag. And I was just a broken man, hiding behind wealth," he replied with a faint smile. "But that day, we saved each other. Never forget that." She squeezed his hand desperately. "I'll carry you with me forever." And with that, Ethan Carter, the man the world once called ruthless, the man who became a father to the lost, took his final breath. The news of his passing spread like wildfire. The world mourned, not just the loss of a billionaire, but of a man who had shown that even the coldest walls of business could be broken by the warmth of compassion. Vigils were held in cities and villages alike. Children lit candles, mothers wept, leaders gave speeches. And in the heart of it all, Lily stood, draped in black, her eyes swollen with grief but her spirit unbroken. At his funeral, attended by thousands, Lily stepped up to speak. Her voice cracked, but her words carried across the silent crowd. Ethan Carter was not just a man of wealth. He was a man of courage. A man who listened to a child when the world would have turned away. He gave me a home, he gave me hope, and he gave all of us proof that kindness can change lives. Today, I don't just say goodbye to a mentor or a guardian. I say goodbye to the father of my soul. But his mission doesn't end here. I will carry it forward. We all must carry it forward. The crowd erupted in tears and applause, a strange harmony of mourning and inspiration. That day, the foundation received more support than it ever had before. Donations poured in, volunteers signed up in record numbers, and governments pledged partnerships. Ethan's death had ignited a fire larger than his life. In the months that followed, Lily worked tirelessly. Every decision she made, she imagined Ethan beside her, guiding her. She often returned to his office, which she had preserved exactly as it was, the mahogany desk, the golden pen, the view of the skyline. Sometimes she would sit in his chair, close her eyes, and whisper, "I hope I'm making you proud." And somehow, in the silence, she felt he was still there. Years later, as the foundation grew into a global movement, Lily wrote a book titled, The Man Who Listened. It told the story of her life, of Ethan's transformation, of the countless lives touched by kindness. The book became a bestseller, translated into dozens of languages, taught in schools as a story of hope. Children across the world read about the billionaire who knelt to hear a little girl's trembling voice, and they carried that lesson in their hearts. Lily never married quickly, because her life was consumed with carrying Ethan's legacy. But eventually, she found love in a man who shared her passion for service. Together they had children, and when her eldest daughter asked one day, "Mom, who was Grandpa Ethan?" Lily smiled, her eyes misting. "He wasn't my real father," she said softly, "but he was the best father anyone could ask for. He saved me when I had nothing. And he taught me that the greatest power in the world is not money, not fame, but kindness." Her daughter hugged her tightly, whispering, "Then I'll grow up to be kind, just like him." And in that moment, Lily knew Ethan's legacy would never die. It would live on not just in the foundation, not just in the books or speeches, but in the hearts of every child who carried his story forward. Decades later, when Lily herself grew old, she often returned to the same skyscraper where her journey had begun. She would sit by the glass windows, watching the city lights, remembering the day she had walked into Ethan's office clutching a rag. She would smile to herself and whisper, "We did it, Ethan. We kept the promise." And somewhere, in the unseen corners of eternity, she felt him smiling back. Years turned into decades, and the world kept moving forward, but the story of Ethan Carter and Lily remained etched into the hearts of millions. Under Lily's leadership, the foundation blossomed into something far greater than either she or Ethan had ever dreamed. It was no longer just an organization, it was a movement. Schools in forgotten villages bore Ethan's name, hospitals carried plaques honoring his memory, and children around the world repeated a simple phrase that became the foundation's motto: kindness rewrites destinies. Lily had grown older now, her golden curls streaked with silver, her once youthful face marked with the gentle lines of years lived with purpose. Yet her eyes still carried the same fire, the same determination that Ethan had once seen in her as a teenager. She often walked through the halls of the Foundation's headquarters, stopping to greet volunteers, listening to their stories, offering a smile or a hug. Every corner of the building carried reminders of Ethan, his portrait in the lobby, his quotes engraved on the walls, his chair preserved in her office as a silent guardian of their shared dream. There were days she would pause in front of his picture and whisper, "I hope you're watching. I hope you're proud." And though the room was silent, she always felt an answer in her heart. Her own children had grown, inspired by her life and Ethan's legacy. Her eldest son worked with the foundation, handling international outreach. Her daughter became a doctor, dedicating her life to treating children in war-torn regions. Even the younger ones, though they pursued different paths, carried kindness like a badge of honor. Lily knew that Ethan's influence hadn't just shaped her life, it had shaped an entire lineage. But even with all her achievements, there were nights when the silence of her home brought back memories. She would sit by the window, looking at the skyline of New York, remembering the day a frightened little girl had wandered into an office with nothing but a rag in her hand. She remembered the way Ethan had looked at her, not as a nuisance, not as a beggar, but as a human being who mattered. That one moment had rewritten her destiny. One evening, as she sat alone with a cup of tea, an old friend from the media visited her. He had once covered Ethan's transformation from ruthless CEO to philanthropist. Now, with gray in his hair, he came to interview Lily for what he called the final chapter. "Do you ever regret not having a normal childhood?" he asked gently. Lily smiled wistfully. "I didn't have toys, or vacations, or even proper meals. But I had a moment that most children never get, the moment someone chose to see me. That moment gave me everything. So no, I don't regret it. Because that rag I carried led me to the man who became my father, my guide, my savior." The journalist leaned closer. "What do you think Ethan Carter would say if he were here today?" Her eyes softened, misting over. "He'd say, 'You did it, Lily. You carried the torch, and the world is brighter because you never let it go out.'" The interview spread across newspapers and screens, once again reminding the world of Ethan's story. Young entrepreneurs quoted him in their speeches, schools told his story as part of their curriculum, and activists used his life as proof that compassion could coexist with power. As Lily entered her twilight years, she made one final decision. She donated her personal fortune to expand the foundation further, ensuring that it would live long after her. When her children asked her why she gave away so much, she smiled and said, "Because wealth means nothing if it doesn't touch lives." Ethan taught me that. The night before she passed away, Lily dreamed of him. She saw herself as a little girl again, standing in that vast office, clutching a rag. And there he was, Ethan, tall, strong, smiling, his hand extended toward her. She dropped the rag and ran into his arms, feeling once again the warmth that had saved her life. When morning came, she was gone, peacefully, quietly, leaving behind not emptiness, but a legacy so vast that generations would remember her name beside his. Her funeral mirrored Ethan's in many ways. Thousands gathered, candles lit the streets, and children carried banners that read, "Kindness rewrites destinies." But this time, the crowd didn't just mourn. They celebrated. Because Lily's life had been proof that one act of kindness could ripple across decades, touching millions of souls. As her coffin was lowered beside Ethan's, the world seemed to pause. Two lives, bound not by blood but by fate, lay side by side forever. People wept, prayed, and promised to carry their mission forward. Years later, a young boy in a distant village read their story in a tattered book. Inspired, he decided to study hard, to help others, to dream bigger than his circumstances allowed. He whispered to himself, "If they could change the world with kindness, so can I." And so the cycle continued. Ethan's choice to listen to a little girl had sparked a chain reaction that would never end. The skyscrapers still stood tall, the city lights still glittered, but somewhere beyond time and space, Ethan and Lily watched together, proud of the world they had left behind. A world a little kinder, a little brighter, because of them.